Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We will get started very soon. I see people arriving, the numbers going up, so I just want to give it a minute before we get started. Great, thank you. I'm going to get started. We have a couple of intro slides, so hopefully as we see people arriving, they will be in time for the presentation. So welcome, and it's great to see everyone this evening. My name is Liz McCarty. I am with a firm called Laura Consulting. I will be your independent third-party facilitator for the conversation this evening. And I'm very excited to welcome you to the Future Palermo project. As I mentioned, we're going to be starting as quickly to 5 as, or close to 5 as we can. And then we'll be scheduled to run until 6:30. By default, everyone will be muted and cameras turned off. If you're having issues with audio, you can call in at 647-370-4685. The number is on the screen. Next slide, please. So tonight we are meeting virtually on Zoom. If you are having issues with your audio, try listening through your computer only instead of headphones, or I mentioned there is a phone number here, 647-374-4685. And when you're prompted for a meeting number, just enter the access code below. Next slide, please. So we always like to open our meetings with a land acknowledgement and, of course, reflect on what the land acknowledgement is and how we can deliver it. We're often taught that it is the responsibility of the settler nations and their descendants to offer a meaningful land acknowledgement. We're also taught that this is not a recital or a set of static words that are spoken at the beginning of a meeting or an event. We should endeavor to make the land acknowledgement personal and meaningful, and relate it back to our experiences with the land, the water, the local treaty, and the original peoples of the territory. In reflection of my roots and connection to the land, my mother has always taught me to treasure our earth and each other, and has instilled those values into my everyday life. We acknowledge that this project is on the traditional and ancestral territory of many nations, including the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Adawandron, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations peoples. These lands, which now form the region of Halton, are part of the treaty lands between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit. We also take this time to acknowledge the water that flows through and across this territory. Miigwech. Next slide, please. So this meeting is being recorded for reporting purposes. The presentation deck will be put online, and we will be writing a report from this meeting. Next slide, please. Okay, so I just want to do a quick round of introductions before we get started. So I see lots of people in the crowd. We're very happy that all of you have joined us tonight for the first public meeting for Discover Palermo. We're expecting to have a great conversation. So we'll have a presentation, and then we'll get into a questions and answers from you. So don't worry, there'll be lots of time for that after the presentation. So from the Palermo project team, we have Paul Kulik. Paul, I'm just gonna ask you to wave and say hello, from Perkins & Will, who is the lead architect.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
Great, thanks, Paul. We have Stephanie Pham from BA Group, who is the transportation consultant.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. We have Allison Bucking from Corsiac, who is urban planner.
Hey, everyone.
Great. And Jennifer Lawrence, who is the environmental planning consultant.
Hello, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. We also have members from the Palermo Village Corporation team in attendance, Adrian Marsili and Aideen Carter from Argo, who will be observing and listening in. I do see a number of planners as well from the town, as well as Councillor Elgar, Councillor Nanda, and I believe that's it for now, and I will acknowledge other counselors as we go. So thank you for joining. I just want to walk you through our agenda quickly, talk about our purpose, and then pass it to Paul. So this is the first public meeting about the future of Palermo as a mixed-use community. The vision will incorporate new housing opportunities that will meet the needs of a range of life stages. This meeting is an opportunity for all of you as the local community to ask questions and share ideas for the future of the site at Dundas Street West and Bronte Road in North Oakville. Our agenda is quite simple. We've done our welcome and introductions. So that was our good warm up. Then you'll hear about the Palermo vision presentation from Paul. And then the majority of the meeting tonight will be our Q&A. So don't worry, we will have time for a discussion at the end. So after the presentation, we'll open it up for the Q&A. You're also welcome to pop any questions you have in the Q&A box at the below as well. So we will endeavor to take live questions as well as written questions as we go. So we are here to listen to your ideas, comments, and questions. That's why we have conversations like this. That's why we have meetings like this, because we really want to hear from you tonight. So with that, I will stop talking and pass it over to Paul.
All right, thank you, Liz. And I'll be your guide for the beginning or the part of this discussion to start today before we turn into a broader question and answer. So I'm going to try and do a quick overview of both the planning process and the proposal in front of us, some of the highlights of the vision, how it ties back to the good work that both the town, the region, and the province have been up to, and then how it will work through the sort of formal next steps, submissions, and opportunities for discussion and feedback. So we hope to get through that in under 20 minutes and really open the floor up for some Q&A and discussion after that. To get us started, I just wanted to walk through this slide on the image screen at the moment that highlights the subject properties in the relation of Oakville. So you can see in the distance, we've got Lake Ontario, downtown Oakville, Bronte Road coming straight up the center, Highway 407 in the foreground. And then on the either side, we've got the Glenorchy and the 14 Mile Creek conservation areas. And so the Palermo Village area is the dashed line in white that sits in between those two on the north side of Dundas. And then the area in blue is really the specific ownership of the Palermo Village Corporation, of which Argo Lands is the one of the major partners. And next slide just will give us a little bit of background on the planning framework and how we got to where we are today. And I think it's important to sort of highlight the fact that again, the province, region, and the town have been identified this area as an strategic growth area since approximately 1999, and it's part of the larger planning framework for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, or the GTA, and it includes a number of details that have been developed over the course of that timeline. And so we've highlighted a few of the sort of more important ones here. In 2017, the process was started for public engagement around the Palermo Village Strategic Growth Area, and many of you may have participated in that planning exercise. In 2021, the policies for the expanded strategic growth area were adopted by Oakville's council. And then there was a number of other elements. So the region adopted, or the province approved, the region's urban structure, which did identify this as a focused area for new development and a mixed use community. And then through that, moving into the more recent times, you're probably familiar with some of the provincial legislation around housing targets and Oakville's demarcation of where that would happen, and then the approval by the province that came in 2022, so last year, around where that growth would occur. In the spring, we've, as part of this group, started the community engagement and online strategy that many of you have participated in, and I'll review a little bit in the next slide. And that brings us to the meeting today. So we are presenting this in advance of the formal zoning bylaw submission. We do expect that to happen later in the summer or the early fall. This is an opportunity to present an early draft of the vision and then get some input before the formal submission goes in. And then we'll be back here again hopefully in the fall of 2023, to do a statutory public meeting in response to that formal zoning bylaw submission. And so that will be a second opportunity to respond to what's in front of us today. So moving ahead, I did mention the online survey that started in the spring. We've had over 500 responses over a broad range of topics and themes. And so thank you for everybody that participated in that. A couple of priorities really emerged out of that work. And so a few around the future of Oakville that really came up were around the idea of building walkable, connected communities with green transit and infrastructure. Then the second one, and sort of a related idea, was around the need for new parks, recreation facilities, and community services to support the residents, new and existing. As far as amenities, the number one sort of survey result was around the need for a new grocery store within walking distance of the community, but also the need for community facilities, rec center, library, daycares, etc. And so this is input that's been taken into our work, and we'll see how that reflects in the plan. Next. So just digging a little bit deeper into some of the themes around the idea of nature, we've heard very clearly the desire to see multi-use trails, loops, biking facilities, seasonal activation, so looking at winter opportunities to use those facilities, but also passive open spaces and the preservation of natural heritage in the area. Around housing, we're really heard loud and clear a desire for housing for families. We want to make sure that our children, future generations, have a place to live within the community, but also a place for seniors and an opportunity for people to age in place and stay in Oakville. From the idea around connection, we've talked about the walkability, but also the need for safer crossings. And we know the sort of traffic around Bronte and Dundas, how that could be an issue, and then opportunities to improve that for pedestrian connections. And then lastly, we heard very loud and clear around ideas around lifestyle and the amenities that could come with new retail, restaurants, cafes, coffee shops, patios, and all of these things. And so we walk through how the plan addresses some of those desires. Next, so broadly, the vision is around creating a neighborhood that is nestled within nature, connected to both the existing city of Oakville or town of Oakville and the broader region and other destinations throughout the GTA. It caters to the lifestyle of Oakville residents, creating the amenities and services that people need, but also creating or providing a diversity of housing types and opportunities for employment. And we'll walk through each of these in kind. So starting with nature, if you could imagine sort of a day in the life of someone living in the sort of future Palermo village, someone could wake up in the morning and go for a morning jog on a new greenway along the Glenorchy conservation area. They could possibly do some yoga in the park, walk their dog at lunch, pick up their child after school and teach them how to ride their bike in one of the new parks, or potentially meet with your family and go for a hike in the conservation area. And so the idea here is, next slide, to sort of create all the elements that can stitch the neighborhood into the nature around it. And that's happening through a series of green connections east to west that we're showing here. Next. But also through a series of open spaces at a variety of scales. And so you can see the big community park in the center labeled C, more for active recreational uses. The urban green in the north of the community that acts as a kind of secondary space, the urban square in orange, that's more of an urban place that could potentially host farmers markets and other events at the center of the Main Street district, and then also the local park in B that serves the residential community around it. And each of these being programmed to suit the needs of local residents. Next slide. Comes together in sort of a vision that we've shown on this slide. And this is a view across from the community park, capturing the community amenity facilities off to the side, the playgrounds, the multi-use trails, that cut across the area, providing connections throughout the community, and then the housing and the nature that envelops the area. Next slide is sort of an aerial view of the same park. And so you can start to see some of the programmed elements that could be in this park, whether it's playing fields, splash pads. These are things that would be developed with the Parks and Rec department, but also the green connections and trails that connect into the Main Street district beyond or around what we're seeing in the foreground is the stormwater management pond and opportunities to stitch nature and those recreational facilities into each other in a very integrated way. Which brings us to connection. A lot of this is possible with the creation of new transit infrastructure. Excuse me. The plan includes provision for both the new rapid transit along Dundas and the Dundas BRT, as well as the transitway along Highway 407. Both of these will be served by new transit terminals that will allow people to connect to and from the Palermo district to the various destinations around the town, the region, and also beyond. Next slide. Just identifies a series of parkways. So we already have the William Halton Parkway, its connections to the hospital, and we see that being a kind of critical east-west spine in the neighborhood, surrounded with broader, greener landscape streetscape elements, rain gardens, deeper setbacks, mature trees that provide connections between the two natural heritage areas, and then the opportunity to really reimagine Bronte Road. We know there's an environmental assessment that the region is working on, and how can that be an opportunity to bring green into the boulevards, into the sidewalks, maybe in deeper setbacks, again, as a way to kind of connect and stitch those parts of the neighborhood together. Lastly, we've got a series of greenways and quiet streets. These are at the neighborhood scale. And you can imagine these being sort of slower in character, a place you can bring your kids out to play hockey on the street, avoiding the traffic, and then still tying the neighborhood together. And then the last one really is just looking at the mid-block muse. And so as we start to get into the detailed design of neighborhood connections, you can imagine some of these being at a kind of slower traffic areas, whether they're one-offs, areas that have reduced speeds, driveways, connections, and places for pedestrians maybe to have the priority. So this is where you could imagine teaching a kid to ride their bike in the safety of a slower street. Now, all of this really comes together around the Main Street district, and what we see in the image here is the transit terminal. And excuse me, I am just asking for some water. Apologies. And the ability to sort of create a series of destinations, whether it's retail, jobs, community facilities within close proximity of residents. So maybe it's not about traveling far distances by bus, transit, car, or otherwise. Sometimes it's about having those destinations close at hand and being able to walk to them very easily. And so a lot of what we've done is integrated the connections with the land use in a way that creates a complete community. Next slide, please. And this brings us to idea of lifestyle. You can imagine a complete community in Palermo that includes a mix of community facilities, places where you could pick up your children, take them to play basketball, also a place where you could go to work, do your shopping after work, bring them back to a patio or a restaurant afterwards, and then meet at the park to sort of complete the day. And where we kind of see on the next slide is this idea that we understand that our lives and our modes of working and our modes of living are changing. People are working from home, they're traveling less, but we're also integrating with our families a lot more. And so we're really hoping that Palermo can be a place where you can work, grow, play, but also create, maybe eat, maybe learn, all in one community. The next slide starts to highlight some of those elements. So the key community amenities, a lot of these came from the secondary plan, included the neighborhood parks, the community park, the community hub and library, and you can see how we've grouped those together so that they're directly connected. And then the transit hub within the Main Street district, and then the second one that's at the 407 transitway. So these start to support that vision. And then the image here is of the Gateway district. So this is at the north end of the study area, connected to that transit terminal at the 407 transitway. And so we do see that as a chance to connect some jobs, some retail and other services directly to that transitway connection. Next slide, please. So when we start to talk about housing, you'll see that the plan starts to evolve some of the housing opportunities that were presented in the secondary plan. We do believe that through the creation of diverse housing choices, we can create a place that creates housing opportunities for the full range of Oakville residents, whether it's families with children, seniors, and everybody in between. So next slide. You can start to see how the neighborhood breaks down, or the study area breaks down into a series of smaller neighborhoods. So I just talked about the Palermo Gateway District. This is the pink area at the top right. This is at the north. We can see that as having potentially some higher density uses, maybe a mix of long-term care, seniors, or other living, centered around the urban square. There's the urban neighborhood district in purple. This is the main area in the center along Bronte Road, with a mix of mid-rise and tall buildings, followed by townhouses. And then the large area in behind is really dedicated to a mix of townhouse, semi-detached and detached houses along the conservation area. And then there's the civic district in yellow, where we have, again, a mix of taller buildings and mid-rises centered around the community park, and that's with the amenities, and then another block reserved for the townhouse and lower density uses. And then lastly, the Main Street district, where we see that biggest mix of uses, and we'll just walk through some of those in the next slide. So this is zooming in. This is the Main Street district just north of Dundas. It's a continuation of Old Bronte Road, and this is where we really see that sort of synergy of the transit terminal, the natural connections, and then the retail uses coming together. And so this is really where we've started to concentrate the most of the sort of vibrant retail uses. So you can see we have some of the office uses that are proposed here, retail that lines Old Bronte, and that could be in new buildings. It could be in some of the heritage buildings that are adapted. It could be in some of the associated with the transit terminal or office uses. We have the community hub and library just on the other side of Bronte and connected by the Greenway, and then the transit hub at the center of it all. And so this sort of combination of uses, we believe, will create that sort of animated and vibrant hub. It'll be the sort of main street for the district, and a place where you should be able to address many of your everyday needs. Next, when we start to look at some of the buildings that are proposed, you're starting to see here that mix of heights and the diverse building types that are proposed. So obviously with the introduction of transit, we're proposing some of the taller buildings up to 35 stories right at that sort of southern edge where the BRT would come, adjacent to the transit, and then tapering down as we head towards the north. So things stepping down to the mid-rise buildings as we get north along Bronte. Then we've also got the lower rise buildings in behind each of those on the west side of Bronte and in behind. And so we do believe that with that mix of taller mid-rise and low-rise single detached buildings, we can start to create that diversity of uses that addresses the full range of housing needs. The next slide just starts to show that image up along the old Bronte extension. And so you can start to see here the elements of the existing heritage buildings potentially being adaptively reused for retail. Maybe it's a pub or a cafe or some other use. New buildings that are sympathetic to that with a mix of brick and other materials that start to respect that heritage. And then a series of newer open spaces with the sort of broader trees, but also preserving space for convenient parking, pickup and drop off, and the ability to do your day-to-day activities with the transit terminal and beyond, potentially integrated into one of the office structures. And so one last thing, when we start to speak about employment, really there's an attempt here to start to create that diversity of uses throughout that support that mix. And so we are anticipating that there could be some opportunities to connect with the emerging sort of medical science industry, and potentially something that works with the hospital adjacent, but also creating places for work from home, maybe a seniors facility, other opportunities for retail that we described. So you could have the mix of retail, food and beverage, other things like that support that Main Street district. Ultimately, with the desire of creating a complete community that maps out across the Main Street district, the gateway, tied to transit, and connected to nature. So I think with that, we just wanted to go through a little summary of the project by numbers. These are some key stats. You don't have to memorize these. We will be able to share these later, but we're really looking to create ultimately a 118-acre mixed-use community serviced by 2 low-emission transit hubs, one at the north by the Transitway, one within the Main Street District. Include a diverse list of new employment opportunities, and then supported by over 20 acres of new parks, ponds, privately owned, publicly accessible spaces, and then a series of natural heritage systems and trails. Overall, we're looking at approximately 6,500 new units, and then organized around a new Main Street that supports a vibrant mix of commercial and retail uses, and then a mix of community facilities, including the community center and library adjacent to the community park, and then access to over 1,000 acres of natural heritage on either of the 2 east and west conservation authorities that surround the neighborhood. And with that, I'm going to pass that back to Liz, I believe, for questions and try to get some water.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Paul. We'll give you a minute to get some water. So yeah, we're going to move into the questions and answers and discussion. Before that, I am remiss, I didn't mention or welcome in the beginning Councillor Peter Longo, so I apologize for that. Welcome, Councillor Longo. We have almost 70 people here tonight, which is fantastic. And of course, the project team is grateful to receive all feedback about the future of the site. And also we are aware that there was quite a bit of information that you just saw. And a copy of the presentation will be available on the website after the meeting. The website is discoverpalermo.ca, and we can make sure to pop that in the chat. So just before I get into sort of the asking of the questions, and of course, members of the project team are here to answer them. We expect to hear many opinions, some of which you will agree with, some of which you won't. We ask everyone to please be a good neighbor and respectful of each other. We also may get quite a few questions, so we're going to endeavor to answer as many as we can and as many as possible. Questions will be compiled into key themes and incorporated into a frequently asked questions following the meeting, as well as a report that will be developed summarizing community feedback heard. And this will all be shared on the website. I just want to let you all know how to ask a question. I do see a couple hands raised and some written questions. So just next slide, please. So there are a couple of ways to do this. One, you can use the Q&A function to submit your question, which is at the bottom, and you can just type it in and I will read it out. We'll also go to live questions. So you can raise your hand. You can see a little raised hand icon. You can click on that. If you are on the phone or using a mobile device, you can press *9, I believe, to raise your hand. And once I get to you, you can press *6. We do have a couple of written questions that we did receive beforehand that we wanted to get into first. And we will endeavor, of course, to get through as many questions as possible. So we do ask if each person can go to do one question at a time. That would be fantastic. Okay, again, enough from me. We're going to go to some questions we received in advance first, just to let you all warm up. And then we'll get into a couple of the written questions and then go to live. We have until about 6:30, so expect me to be very busy moving along. And I appreciate people's questions already coming in. So the first set of questions are just based on community feedback and comments that we've received to date via the survey, social media, as well as email inquiries. So the first will go to Stephanie from the BA group, focusing on traffic and active transportation. So Stephanie, I see you're ready there. What are the traffic impacts on Dundas Street and Bronte Road, and how will these be resolved with an influx of this new population? How will you improve safe travel for pedestrians crossing Dundas Street and Bronte Road? We've heard that question, those two questions a lot. We thought we'd start there. Stephanie, if you can answer those, please.
Hi, Liz. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this evening's meeting or evening. So to answer Liz's question, in terms of the traffic impacts on Dundas and Bronte, so BA Group is in the process of preparing a traffic study, and we are going to be assessing these impacts of the study area development, including the Palermo project that we're speaking of today. So we are working closely with the town of Oakville and the region of Halton, and it's going to go through an iterative process, their planning process, and it will go through a rigorous review. This will also be made available for the public as well. So that will be posted in the future as we go through that process. Regarding the improvements for the safe travel of pedestrians crossing Dundas and Bronte, our goal is to integrate some form of traffic calming, traffic mitigation, and safety measures into our plan. And we do want to build a new community that provides that safe pedestrian experience with wider sidewalks, integrated cycling routes and infrastructure, and also, as mentioned earlier, 2 transit hubs. So that connectivity is quite important to us. With these 2 transit hubs, we are hoping to reduce then the reliance on the car and then bring that appearance of a safer, more accessible transportation option. And by doing so, we're hoping to then decrease the road congestion in the area. We're also planning on providing high concentration of buildings in proximity to the transit hub. And so by doing this, along with providing the higher densities along Bronte, along Dundas Street, we're hoping to then ensure that we have a good flow of people going in and out of the community that's a bit more easily accessible, and to just improve the quality of connectivity throughout the site and not rely too much on the car. And again, we are working quite closely with Town of Oakville and the Halton region. We're trying our best to integrate transportation improvements for Palermo as well as the surrounding area. So we recognize not just necessarily our site, but also the overall network that spans between Tremaine Road to the west, Third Line to the east, Highway 407 to the north, and Dundas Street to the south. We are looking at also the background area developments surrounding our site and recognizing what the trends would be for adjacent developments in the area. And so again, when we're communicating with the town and the region, we're hoping that by doing this earlier in the process, we can then provide these implications and any troubleshooting early on in the process. And that would also include then some sort of interaction with the proposed development regarding the Bronte Road widening design process, which is also currently underway.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. It's not always easy going first, so thank you for that. I'm going to go to Allison now from Corsiac, focusing on project details and a little bit of more focus on planning. How many people will this new development bring to the area, and how many units are you planning to build here?
So the question was, if we could just flip to this site area slide, I think it'd be helpful to help bring people to see exactly where the PVC lands are located in comparison to the overall Palermo village. Great, so you can see that the PVC lands are the areas highlighted in blue. So the plan for the PVC lands is to deliver approximately 6,500 new homes to Oakville. And based on the new housing targets assigned to Oakville by the province of Ontario, 33,000 new homes will need to be built over the next 10 years. Through the PVC proposal, it will achieve about 20% of the town's goals in a single development with direct access to major regional roads, a large connectivity network, and 2 planned higher order transit hubs. Palermo Village itself is identified as a strategic growth area in the region of Halton official plan, which as per provincial and municipal policy are areas where higher density mixed use development are to be directed. Within Palermo Village, the region has assigned a minimum density target of 160 residents and jobs per hectare, which is to be measured across the entirety of the strategic growth area, which for the PVC lands equates to a minimum of 7,600 residents and jobs. I think we're all aware that there is a shortage of housing in the GTA, which has made access to housing difficult for many. Palermo will do its best to provide a range of different housing types that are suitable for first-time homeowners, families looking for more space, people looking to downsize. And we know that it's really important for people to call Oakville home and to be able to do so as their needs change and have children and grandchildren be able to live close by.
Great. Thank you, Allison. Paul, I'm going to go back to you. Hopefully you've had a bit of water. This is focusing on sort of amenities and services. Again, these are questions we've been hearing. I think this is a good one, though, that helps us kind of start the conversation here. And I do see some questions about this as well. What community benefits and or amenities and services will this project deliver?
There we go. Yeah, Ashita, if we could just have the slide that highlighted some of those on the map. So a number of these amenity facilities were already identified in the secondary plan, and so we're looking to deliver on that, as well as some of the new amenities that may come with some of the commercial developments. And so what we're showing here are, first of all, the parks. And so we have the community park in the center of the area. This will be the larger park, I believe 2.2 or 2.6 acres. Will include the mix of sort of recreational facilities. The details of that will be developed with the Parks and Rec department as we work through it. There's a community park on the sort of western edge along the natural heritage area. And then there's the urban square, which will be within the Main Street district. We imagine this to be more of a kind of urban facility, maybe some more hard surface paving that includes opportunities for programmed events. Adjacent to the large community park, we're showing the community hub and library. So it's the blue circle. We're imagining that these can be right adjacent to each other so that kids, visitors, seniors, and others don't need to cross the street when they're going from one to the other, but have direct access to the park facility. And then there's the transit hub itself, which will be located within the key development. This one will be delivered as part of the development versus the one at the transitway that'll be developed as part of Metrolinx's schedule and planning. Another amenity that will be provided is the a trail loop around the stormwater management pond, which is sort of just adjacent to the park as well. And then that together combines with the greenways and other facilities to create the sort of network of green connections that get you beyond to the existing natural heritage facilities and those amenities. Beyond that, we can start to think about some of the retail facilities and other commercial uses. And I think there's a follow-up question, so we could get to that later, Liz, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. We'll get to that one soon. Just two more, and then I want to get to some of these other questions. Allison, to you again, just about the project timeline. I know Paul provided sort of an overview about the project timeline, and that was very helpful. Thank you, Paul. We will share it again at the end. But the real question here is sort of what is the timing for the project and when will construction start?
That's a great question. So this is a long-term project with many phases. The aim is to start construction in 2027, starting with the community benefits to ensure they can be delivered in the initial stages. And so community benefits be things such as like the library, community center, parks, transit hub. And just to minimize nuisances, we'll be developing a construction management plan throughout later on in the planning process.
Okay, great. Thanks, Allison. And we'll share this timeline again. And a reminder, the presentation, the deck will be on the project website. Okay, this last one, I couldn't help but dig into a bit. Paul, I'm hoping you can focus it. It's about the character of Oakville. And I actually am an Oakvillian. I grew up in Oakville, so this one is near and dear to my heart. How will you maintain the small town feel of Oakville with this project? I think that's really important to think about as we have this conversation.
Yeah, I think the attempt here really is to address not only the small town feel, but also the heritage of Oakville and Palermo specifically. And so I think maybe if we could just go forward, there was a couple of the slides in the nature area that speak to, and I'll just walk through them individually. This one is a good place to start, is the sort of network of open spaces. We are hoping to create through the diversity of housing types, places for families and housing that'll include everything from detached, semi-detached to townhouse types that are connected to nature and then supported by a series of greenways that connects to the natural heritage system, but also parks that create the spaces for children, seniors, families to play. And so that'll happen at that scale, and that'll, I think, speak to elements of the small town and really at the kind of residential neighborhood scale. And then the second part and we can maybe capture some of the Main Street images that are further down, speaks to the area along the Main Street district and where we have some of the existing heritage buildings. And so those have been mapped out and identified as part of our work. Some of them are within the PVC or the Argo properties, and then we're working with the neighbors throughout, and then also connecting to the areas on existing south of Dundas, really to kind of map out the broader focus of the heritage district of Palermo itself. And so what we're starting to see is the adaptive reuse of some of those existing heritage buildings. And then looking to create on the area that we have that is primarily new development, a sympathetic architecture. And what you're starting to see in this image is a kind of palette of materials that speaks to the brick and the character of that existing heritage and the small town feel, but also the shape and the design of the street itself here, with a kind of slower traffic on the main street that gets us off of Old Bronte, slows everything down a little bit and creates those opportunities for communities. A place where you can drop off your car, pick up some groceries, run some errands, meet a friend, or walk if you're in one of the adjacent buildings, and creating that opportunity for community within that. And then looking to work through the details of the streetscape, whether it's the paving patterns, the tree planting, and the sort of rain gardens that not only reflect that heritage, but start to speak to the kind of community that can be created around those places. So hope that addresses it, and then we'll be working through that in more detail as we work through future stages of the application.
Just Paul, on that, just can you touch on sort of the history of Palermo and the thinking around there?
I think it's an important part of the work. It's worth maybe highlighting that the existing heritage and the designated buildings are on some of the adjacent properties. There aren't any on the Argo properties themselves. And so we're looking to work in a kind of sympathetic way that speaks to the work that's going to be happening adjacent on a series of properties, and then looking to create the materials that respond to that heritage, opportunities potentially for public art commemoration that can be integrated into those streetscapes, and then ultimately recreating some of that village feel and the community feel that would have existed here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. All right, I'm going to go to a question we received from Vanessa. This focuses on retail, so I think this is the question, Paul, you were referring to. Vanessa's asked, what is the approximate square footage dedicated to retail? So Paul, that is you.
Okay. I'm not sure that that's something that we're looking to finalize at this moment. So the team has been working through the survey that we've done in the community here, as well as sort of specialized retail consultants, and really, first of all, trying to identify the needs around retail. So we are looking to create a series of what we typically call neighborhood serving retail. So whether it's the bank, the pharmacy, flower shops, some of the smaller food and beverage places, restaurants that could be along there, and looking to create a mix of those. And then also very loud and clear, we've heard the need for a grocery store and sort of a food place. And so what we're starting to do is map those out along the main street. And really, we're looking to recreate a little bit of that sort of smaller town Main Street charm along here. So we're imagining smaller retail units, anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000, 3,000 square feet that can be along there. Maybe they're in some of the adaptive reused buildings in other places, and then augmented with some of the office uses. So you can imagine some lunch places for some of the office workers that could be in this area. The exact number is going to get refined through that. And again, we're likely going to look to zoning to have some flexibility that allows for certain live, work, and other provisions. We're not quite sure where the future of retail will be with the pandemic. And we want to make sure that we have a resilient community that creates that sort of main street that allows it to evolve. If it's going to be a real estate agent one day, maybe turns into a store the other day, and then evolves over time. So we're looking to build in something that's going to be resilient and flexible and will last the next 100 years ultimately.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. Is there anyone else on the team who wants to weigh in, or? Okay, we're good. All right, so I'm going to go to the next question from Anonymous. Will there be condominiums in the development, or will it be rental buildings? Focusing in on housing, Paul, I think this is still you.
I could maybe clarify that I think out of the 6,500, approximately 1,500 or 1,000 are some of the low-rise products. So those could be anything from freehold to townhouse low-rise products. The balance, so approximately 45 to 5,000 units, will be in the sort of mid-rise and the taller buildings. And those will likely be a mix of condominium and rental. And I don't know that the final determination has been made on that. There may be individual development partners for each. But it'll likely be a mix of both condominium and rental.
Okay, great. I just want to loop back in on the question around heritage and the history of Palermo. Allison, I think you may have something to add here to provide some more information, and I don't want to miss that opportunity.
So much, Liz. Yeah, so we know that Palermo has deep roots in the history of Oakville. It's one of Ontario's oldest settlements, dating back to 1806. And it was once known as Hagerstown and eventually became renamed Palermo. Within the historic Palermo village, there's about 16 heritage buildings, 3 of which are designated, 5 are listed, and 7 are not listed. While none of those buildings are on our property, we recognize that our property itself was part of the larger Palermo village, which plays an important role in Oakville's history. And so as part of our work, we've reviewed the history of Palermo and our site's role in its history, and that found that part of the western property on the west side of Bronte Road contained one of the former Hager homestead. So our site's design will pay homage to the historical nature of the area. It'll be designing our Old Bronte Main Street with history in mind through the use of historic building material design treatments. We know that Palermo Village was historically a popular spot for travelers and was historically known as a top employer for innovative farming equipment. So our hope is that through this plan, we'll reignite this vision as a destination and center for employment and innovation. And through the review process, we'll be discussing naming rights on certain things such as streets, parks, squares to commemorate the historic Palermo Village.
Okay, great. Thank you, Allison, for that clarification. I'm going to go to, we've got one raised hand, so I'm just going to go over to the participant who has raised their hand. Melissa, I see your hand is up, so I'm going to just invite you to ask your question. And if you could just introduce yourself very quickly, you should be able to ask your question now.
Hi, so I want to start off just by saying that you guys have a really beautiful vision, but you know, reality is not always the same as the vision. And I keep hearing you guys talk about, you know, we want this to be a place for families. You said that you've got 6,500 units, and someone here said that translates to a minimum of 7,600 residents. That math doesn't make sense to me because a typical family of a mom and dad and 2 kids would mean 6,500 times 4, which doesn't add up to 7,600. So my question has to do with structure. If you're taking 20,000 people, they have to get in and out of this brand new subdivision. You guys rely on the assumption that, oh, they're all going to take transit and they're all going to work in this little subdivision, and that's not reality. Majority of them aren't going to. The majority of them are going to work downtown, other places, and they're going to be driving to and from. So someone said something about traffic calming measures. I'm not sure what that means. Someone said something about, oh yeah, we're going to do a study. You put all the time and energy into this beautiful plan, and we haven't even looked at infrastructure and traffic. We need to know what's going to happen, because if you don't look at this, you don't address it, it's going to take 30 minutes to go 5 meters down Dundas or Bronte. So what are you guys going to do?
Okay, great. Thank you, Melissa. So I know, Stephanie, you kind of worked at answering the questions around transportation and traffic, but I think it would be super helpful if you start to respond, and then if anyone else wants to jump in. And Melissa, thank you for raising that. That's exactly why we have these conversations, is to hear these questions and address concerns.
Great. Thank you, Melissa, for bringing up those questions concerning traffic and safety, and just bringing into light the right reality of the area. And so as part of our study, it's not complete right now, but we are in the middle of working through it. And so as part of that, our study does cover comprehensive assessment of the peak hour traffic volumes, as well as travel patterns for people in the area. And we're taking into consideration not just our own site, but the planned growth of the overall premise. So it expands again from Tremaine all the way to Third Line, and then 407 to Dundas going north-south. We do recognize our different uses in the area. So that means like there are some internal interaction between residential use, commercial uses, such as retail, cafes, and office. And as part of our study, we do also recognize that there are transit hubs and nodes. So that includes your Dundas BRT, the 407 Transitway, and the transit hub within the Palermo lands itself. And so we do expect that that would take a portion to reduce the auto mode share in the study area, not saying that we completely neglect vehicle traffic altogether. That is part of the assessment as well. And so the expectation over time is we will be looking at the trends of like how people are moving and understanding that there are alternative forms of transportation for them to use from their destinations to the area as it continues to build out. And so that will continue to be reflected. As part of our study too, we are, in terms of those mitigation measures you mentioned earlier, we are looking to potentially implementing or suggesting a 2-stage crossing, pedestrian crossing, just to improve the quality and the safety, especially around Dundas and Bronte Road, as well as potential like additions of signalized intersections to then help improve connectivity to the transit hub itself. So there's like a lot of moving parts as part of the project, and we do recognize all these things, and I'm happy to dive in further if there's any additional questions.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. And I'm imagining there will be more questions, and I think there are in the Q&A that have been submitted. I think also for folks, if your question wasn't answered tonight, or you have an additional question, you can also email at info@discoverpalermo.ca, and the team will get back to you with a response as soon as they can. Again, this is why we have sessions like this and meetings like this. It's super important. So, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to kind of jump in to answer the first question about kind of the math not adding up with the density and the planned number of units. And just to clarify, the 7,600 is a minimum density target for the area. And then through our proposal, we're proposing to exceed it, which is encouraged through municipal and provincial planning policy. So I just wanted to clarify why the math wasn't adding up.
Yeah, thank you. And it's helpful sometimes, right? We need to wrap our minds around sort of a lot of these terms, right? Which people just, we should just lay it out and share what things mean. Okay, great. So I've got some other questions here. So we've kind of grouped a couple of them, but I think I'm still reading them as is. This is from Ferris, Dinesh, and Megan. So 3 people have sort of asked similar questions. Stephanie, this is again focused on transportation. Is widening Bronte Road part of this development? For the traffic issue, is there any consideration being given to building a pedestrian bridge?
So to answer the first part of that question about the road widening along Bronte Road, it is part of the TMP. So with Halton Region, that there are considerations for changing Bronte Road from 4 lanes to 6.
Sorry, and Stephanie, what is a TMP?
Sorry, the Transportation Master Plan.
Thank you.
No problem. So because of that, there are considerations. And from my understanding, there is the design that's underway through the Halton Region. Our group has been in communication with Halton Region to express our ideas of what we can do to improve the conditions. So that is in that way a part of the development. And we are providing some ideas of how to make it safer and better. Part of that is, as mentioned earlier, potential two-stage pedestrian crossings. There's also consideration for also bicycle infrastructure and to consider dedicated lanes versus separated lanes versus a shared lane. So all these things, again, to improve the quality for connectivity. Regarding the part 2, so that was to do with, if you could repeat that for me, Liz.
So the part 2, is there any consideration being given to building a pedestrian bridge?
Okay. So at this time, we haven't had conversations about a pedestrian bridge as of right now, but that's something most certainly we can share with the team.
Just another question, Stephanie, for you on transportation. This is from Councillor Elgar, actually. How will residents safely walk across Bronte Road and Dundas, since it already is a very busy multi-lane intersection?
Yes, so I definitely understand the concern, and that's why this is something that our team has had discussions with the Halton region as well as town of Oakville, Oakville Transit on top, not just necessarily Bronte and Dundas, also to do with the transit hub, but to propose the idea of a two-stage pedestrian crossing. So for example, and I can think off the top of my head, would be at in Toronto, we've got university and college and how they have that two-stage process. So you cross halfway, there's a refuge area for your pedestrians. And then on the second set, then you move forward to the next half to continue your journey. So that's one way of, for example, to make that a little bit more achievable and not feel like it's so wide of a road to like cross the entire way in one shot.
Okay, thank you. Again, the team is listening tonight, and these are the kinds of questions we can also take as feedback and things to consider. The team is writing a report from the conversation tonight, and we'll be posting frequently asked questions online as well. Okay, so Paul, this is a question focusing in on housing from Susan. Please describe the senior housing option that is projected for Palermo. Have seniors been engaged to find out their interest in seniors housing?
Yep. So at the moment, the Gateway District, which is the northern edge of the site, is where we've identified an opportunity for seniors housing. I think if we could just zip back the previous slide we had there, a sheet out the aerial image. In one of these blocks here, we're looking potentially to have the seniors housing. So it could be something that faces the natural heritage linkage, has access to one of the neighborhood parks, but is also closer to some of the retail and other amenities that would be part of the broader Gateway District. As far as speaking to actual seniors, that hasn't happened to date, and the opportunities to introduce seniors housing it's actually quite flexible. It's something that could be integrated through the planning process is flexible enough that it allows a variety of housing types to be introduced in different blocks throughout this work in the future, should that need change or arise. So it's something that we will be working with and ultimately identifying the partners that could operate some of that seniors housing to figure out the details of that mix and the facilities that would come to support that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. Stephanie, this is back to you. Another question about transportation from an anonymous participant. Can you advise what is the schedule for construction of the Dundas Bus Rapid Transit? Is this publicly announced?
So from my understanding with the Dundas BRT, there is a document online from the Halton Region website. It's CEA preliminary design plans, and it's to reflect the Dundas corridor study. So those plans are available online. And in terms of timelines, that's something that as of right now.
Sorry, Stephanie, I just want to stop you. What did you say it was? It's
the EA preliminary design plans.
So that's an environmental assessment?
Yes, environmental assessment, my apologies, environmental assessment, design and preliminary design plans, and that's part of the Dundas corridor study that's on the region website. So that is publicly available.
Okay, and it's on the region's website?
Yes.
Okay.
If there's a link that's needed, I could always also provide that information.
That might be helpful.
And in terms of the timelines itself, that's something for the segment of Oakville, that being the Dundas, or sorry, the Bronte station location. That timeline hasn't been released from my understanding and my knowledge. I believe it's by municipality. So Mississauga has their timelines posted on their City of Mississauga website. So I believe their segment is timeline is posted, but for Oakville, as far as I'm concerned and that I know of, it's not available at this time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stephanie. I'm going to go to the live questions again. So over to Susan, and then I'm going to get some water because I need some water also. Susan, I'm just opening you up. You should be good. Are you there?
Thank you. Hi, Paul. You mentioned the location of the senior housing, but not the units that are to be built. The reason I'm asking is that so many units that are being built for seniors seem to be all in clustered condo type units, not in more independent living. Many seniors are not willing to give up their homes because there's nothing out there that we want to move to. If they were townhouses that were 1,800 square feet, then we're talking. But many of us will not give up our homes and will stay in a home with 4 empty bedrooms rather than move to a condo. So can you please describe the kind of units that are to be built?
Yeah, I think, again, the plan at this stage of a rezoning still allows for a lot of flexibility, and we haven't committed to the exact unit mix or even an operator for a seniors facility here. And so while that has been identified as the kind of primary opportunity at this time, I think there's nothing stopping the plan for creating a seniors facility or something that's marketed towards the senior community in any of the other blocks, right? So for example, the image that we have on the screen to the left includes a mix of townhouses, detached or semi-detached, and others. And if there was a demand for senior housing in that form, I think the plan would be able to accommodate that. So there's not, if there is a need or a strong demand for supported living in a kind of 1,800 square foot townhouse model that has some sort of facilities and programs that would cater to seniors, the plan allows for that to occur in those blocks as well.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Susan, I hope that answered your question. If you have a follow-up, you can always raise your hand or type it in the Q&A. I'm going to go to another live question. Sangeeta, you should be live.
Yes, I am.
Okay, you've got a bit of an echo. Do you have 2
Sorry.
microphones?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll go into the other room.
Okay.
So to build on what Susan was saying, what is kind of concerning to me is that these plans have been built. Yes, there is flexibility, but no input has been sought from the seniors. And this is a standard issue that most seniors have raised who live in Oakville with their counselors. There was a report that was produced by the newspaper. If you look at the Global Mail, this is a standard concern that has been raised by people, that they are not moving out of their homes and empty 3 to 4 bedrooms are staying where they are because they don't want to move to condos. And the government and even planners like Palermo, you guys are all building, or your plans are all building condominiums. So I think it's not a very good use of the land and the plan if you're not taking into consideration your clientele. And the second issue that the second question that I have is not related to seniors, it's related to the businesses. What kind of incentives are being provided to businesses, and what kind of businesses other than the retail are going to be moving to Oakville? Because the assumption that was made was most people are going to be working from home. That was during the pandemic, and yes, people may want to work from home, but the reality is that the larger organizations are forcing their employees to go back to work 3 to 4 times, and majority of the people are working downtown Toronto. They're not living and working in Oakville. So what kind of business opportunities are going to be given so that AI, all future type of businesses will be willing to move here, like Microsoft or any such hubs.
Okay. Okay, so 2 parts. Paul, I'm gonna ask you to focus on the question around businesses and employment. The first note, though, and others can jump in, I think we've heard a couple of times concerns around not consulting with seniors. So I think the team just noted they'd be more than happy to have a consultation and a discussion with seniors. So I just wanted to let everyone know that. So I guess stay tuned, or the team will get in touch or something. But I think I'm glad to hear that's going to happen, because we're hearing it loud and clear tonight. So Sangeeta, thank you for raising it again. So Paul, can we talk about employment, retail, any incentives? Where's the team at with this?
Yep, no, for sure. I mean, I think if I had a crystal ball, I'd be a rich man. But all of the work we're seeing, and we work for very diverse clients that do office space and workplace and retail around Canada, across Toronto, and they're all trying to answer that question: how do we get people back to work, and how do we create the incentives to attract those office users and those jobs? And one thing we do hear loud and clear is the importance of sort of the life and the workplace health and well-being. Sorry, can't count my tongue. Around that, and creating sort of healthy communities and spaces where people can come to work, but also deliver on the health and well-being that supports that healthy living, and that comes with sort of healthy mixed communities. And so office users are attracted to places that have the sort of retail and commercial and vibrant life, but also the green space for health and well-being that can be provided by the trails and the connections to nature and the natural heritage areas. And so really what we're looking to do is build off of that base, and then identify the kind of mix of retail, but also other jobs that could be here. And so the other plan, I think if we can flip to it, did identify the sort of office use. And so there is a need and or an element of office that's dedicated in that plan. It's right at the center, and that'll be used to attract a mix of more traditional office uses. And then there's additional work, conversations happening with more tailored kind of life sciences, health and wellness, space for doctors, pharmacies that can work with the community, but also in partnership with the hospital that's just to the east along William Halton, and looking to create some of that health science type employment, whether it's more research-based or serving the local community, or flexible to accommodate both, is another thing that we can look at. And that's some of the kind of really innovative employment that's happening right now, is some of that research-based thing. So there are a number of plans. I don't know that there's going to be a single answer that'll address all of those needs, but by delivering that kind of mix of uses, we do believe you're going to get a community that ultimately is sort of resilient, stands the test of time, creates the places for jobs, but also builds the community that supports that.
Okay. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Sangeeta, for your question or your questions. And of course, we are going to be documenting all the feedback that we're hearing tonight, as well as there was the survey. So there's insights from that, but certainly hearing the focus on retail, as well as employment opportunities, and how do we get awesome businesses to come. So Jennifer, I have a question for you now. Another anonymous attendee. What environmental assessments have been conducted so far? What are planned? Is this degree of density environmentally friendly? So Jennifer, if you're there, can you answer the question?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So prior to any development taking place in North Oakville, the developers are required to undertake an environmental implementation report. And that report is prepared by a multidisciplinary team. It includes environmental planners, ecologists, hydrogeologists, fluvial geomorphologists, and water resource engineers. And one of the primary goals of that report is to demonstrate that the proposed development will have no negative impacts on the natural heritage features or on their functions. And that report is submitted with the planning application. It is reviewed by the town, the region, and Conservation Halton. And the development cannot proceed until that report has been approved by those three agencies. So we have prepared an environmental implementation report to support this application, and it will be submitted with the application.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jennifer, for that clarification. Okay, so Stephanie, a couple of questions for you. One from Tracy: how many parking spaces will be provided for all of the visitors? And from another anonymous participant: will adequate parking be made available for the existing residents, most of whom drive cars, to patronize the retail establishments in this new community?
Okay. So to answer that as a whole, we are looking at a vehicle parking strategy holistically for the area. And so we've considered multiple solutions, including on-street, underground infrastructure, and structures above to allow this node to flourish. We also provide considerations for pickup and drop-off facilities to support the use of ride share and delivery services. Regarding providing sufficient on-site parking, we are going to do this for your residents, plus their visitors, customers, employees, for the retail and services in the area. Residential parking is on the top of our mind, so we are coordinating this with future builders to ensure that parking is sufficient, and we want to be able to support the people living and coming in from this site. Initially, we're going to start with the development by targeting the proposed providing parking consistent with parking requirements, and that's set out by the North Oakville zoning bylaw. We'll continue to then monitor the parking demand and see as the area builds out to ensure that we're providing that balance of supply versus the demand. And once we meet that baseline, we'll make sure that we're not providing an excess amount of parking, but providing enough at the same time. So that way we're just servicing and encouraging the use of automobile demand as we need and see fit. A lot of the parking arrangements we're hoping to do is to accommodate the residential and commercial uses of the development. So this will happen through our parking strategy, and it'll be continue to be confirmed through the application process. And this will be reviewed by the town. Again, we're working quite closely with Oakville as well as Oakville Transit to address these concerns about parking. And so this will be part of the docket.
Okay, great. I'm going to go to a question from Angela. Paul, this is on kind of the history of Palermo and the retail as well. So this is from Angela. What about the concept of using the model of Toronto's St. Lawrence Market as an extension of the historic Palermo sites with heritage exterior but retail indoors?
Yeah, so I think if I understand the question correctly, I mean, St. Lawrence Market and the neighborhood around it, for maybe those that haven't visited, is really includes a mix of both heritage buildings or historic buildings, and then a whole lot of new buildings that are a mix of both retail, community, and residential uses. And from a kind of design perspective, it integrates a lot of brick and sort of the kind of historic features on the new buildings, whether it's the structural bays, and you can start to see the image on the right where we're starting to do that, trying to recreate or make reference to some of those elements, but also starting to design things with the sort of retail at the base, not unlike what you may have seen at St. Lawrence Market. The approach works really well because what you end up with is the sort of lower mid-rise, we call them podiums, so the lower buildings that are up against the street, and then the towers that get sort of tucked further back. And part of the work we're going to be doing is really trying to find ways to make sure that that happens in a way that you're privileging the street, making sure we got good sun on the street, protecting from the shadows, and creating streets that are of a human scale, not unlike what's happened at St. Lawrence. So I think it's a good suggestion, comment, and something that we'll work with and evolve as the plan progresses. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Another question for you around housing. This is from Megan. Are there any single family homes in this area? Will there be townhomes or multi-level types of townhomes?
Right.
As well, we have a question from Councillor Elgar. What is the projected mix of the 6,500 units and what is the number of people per unit split by housing type? So a couple of questions there. We'll start with Megan's. Are there any single family homes in this area? Will there be townhomes or multi-level types of townhomes?
Yeah, so Ashita, if we could maybe go back to the neighborhood plan that had the different colors for each neighborhood. The purple neighborhood on the plan you're about to see is the urban neighborhood district. And so what we're seeing is the mid-rise buildings along the street, but beyond that, and then into the yellow, those areas are where we're grouping all of the single family homes, the townhouses, as well as the stacked townhouses. So these are when you get a townhouse on top of a townhouse. And the exact layout is not shown because it's something that will be developed with the future stages of the plan and in partnership with the individual developers that may be responsible for that. But broadly, what we're assuming is that some of the single family homes will be clustered along the edge of the site, so backing on to the Conservation Authority. And then as we get closer to Bronte, we'll be switching to townhouses and then some of the stacked townhouses as we approach Bronte itself. In total, that'll be approximately 1,000 units in that sort of ground-related lower rise housing that we're describing. And then the balance, so another about 5,500 units will be in the mid-rise and the taller buildings that you're seeing along Bronte and into the mixed-use district. As far as the exact mix of unit types, that has not been established at this time just yet.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Just digging through here for a question. Okay, so Paul, this is a question again, just about schools from Anonymous and Teresa. Where are the schools in this plan? Can you advise what educational facilities are planned?
Is that for me, Liz?
Yes.
Sure.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, no, the application that'll go in later this summer will be circulated through the town, and that includes through the various school boards, at which time there will be an assessment of the population projections, and that'll be done by the school boards. That'll be compared against their existing sort of occupancy numbers, projections, etc. And then working with the school boards, we will identify any needs for additional capacity in the system. So it's something that will be worked on together with the school boards as the application works its way through.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Sorry, one second. Okay. So I've got a few questions here, Paul, on height and density. So the following sort of covers off the series of questions. From Megan, how many towers is the development organization planning on building in total in this area, and how many floors would these be? Some people have asked sort of why so high? Why are they so close to existing neighborhoods? Why would the taller buildings not be situated closer to the 407 rather than Dundas? And why are there massive towers as part of the plan? So try to group them in. I apologize if I missed something, but I think it's overall follows sort of a thread here around height as well as the placement of height.
Okay. Yeah. So as far as the placement or the use of towers, ultimately, what the plan starts to do is introduce the idea of diversity of housing types. And so with the single, detached, and other low-rise and townhouse products, we're also looking to introduce some of the taller condominium products. And so with the idea that you're creating that diversity depending on the various stages of life, family types, and sort of affordability, you can create a complete community. with that in mind, then the actual placement of those towers, what we've tried to do is concentrate the taller buildings. And so we're looking at up to 30 to 35 stories at the sort of intersection of Dundas, and then tapering down sort of 20 stories as you go north from there, and then down to the mid-rise along along Bronte itself. And then with some taller heights at the Gateway District again. Really, the idea here is to cluster that taller heights around the transit infrastructure. So we're doing it at the transit terminal on the south, where all the retail, office, and other uses are, on the Dundas BRT and the ability to get in and out easily. And then secondly, at the Gateway District, where the 407 transit terminal is. So looking to kind of group the density and activity intensity of uses with transit. Those heights and the towers have been shaped in a way that looks to create narrower buildings, and so you're not having the shadow impacts along there, and then they're spaced with a sort of tower separation that ensures privacy between them. And so there's a number of considerations that'll be integrated into something called the urban design guidelines that'll be part of the formal submission later in the summer, and we'll start to speak to that sort of rationale around the heights. And I don't know, Allison, if there is something to add beyond that point.
Yeah, and I think just to elaborate on that, Dundas Street, Bronte, and Highway 407 are both, well, all three of them are identified as higher order transit corridors in the regional official plan, with Dundas and Bronte being identified as regional intensification corridors. And per planning policy, this is where we're supposed to be directing higher density mixed use development. So the plan's really focusing on providing the highest heights around those kind of key intersections of those regional intensification corridors.
Okay, great. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Paul, and thank you for those questions. I'm going to go to a live question now. I see a hand up, so we have Hari, I believe. Hari, you should be able to unmute, and if you just want to say hello and ask your question.
Hello, yes. So my name is Hari. I've been an Oakville resident for about 10 years and just around the vicinity. What I see is that the amazing growth that we have seen on the Bronte, this stretch is seen not just as that connects between the region, within the region, but also major arterial. People who use from QEW, Bronte is one of the easiest access points to get to 407 or into 401 itself, outside. I don't see there are any other major arteries that connect QEW and 401 anywhere in this region. So given that the amount of growth that is being projected here, are we seeing a way that we don't impact the traffic flow on the artery roads by way of any service roads or say overpasses or grade separators? Is there anything in, that's been seen evolved in the primary, secondary plan that's been discussed within the region at all?
Okay, thank you, Hari. Stephanie, I'm hoping you can answer this question.
Yes, so thank you for your question, Hari. We have considerations, as you can see in this neighborhoods plan. It's a bit grayed out, but you can see that the William Halton Parkway does extend further east-west through our site. So it goes to the east towards like Third Line, and then to the west towards Tremaine. There's also another one. It's labeled as Glenorchy Road. So you can also see it's a bit grayed out, but west of us, there is a potential connection. These are all provided as part of the secondary plan. They've also been shown in other developments west of us as well. So we are providing that connectivity. So that these two streets that are east-west connectors, they are parallel to Dundas Street and the 407. That helps to alleviate a little bit of that pressure on Bronte Road, but mind you, I understand your concerns when it comes to the access to the 407 and the QEW. And so for those reasons, there is an extension to that I wanted to add is the transit component. So our transit terminal will be able to funnel for both local transit routes that exist today that then can bring you to, for example, to Bronte GO station. But it's also an opportunity for us to then also integrate intercity connections for GO Transit. So that being if you need to commute to say Toronto and you want to use Up Express, that this transit hub can also facilitate that. So it's combining both the existing infrastructure for transit today, that's local, as well as the future GO transit services. We're also providing connections from a walkability perspective from our transit hub to the future Dundas BRT. So of course, I know that's not necessarily answering all of your vehicle concerns, but it does alleviate some of that pressure because it gives people in the area an opportunity to try other ways to commute to their place of work.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Allison, do you have anything you want to add here? No? Okay. Sorry, I saw you go off mute. All right, so we've got time for one more question. I think this has been fantastic, and then I'm going to remind everyone what happens next with questions in the website, and then I'm hoping someone can quickly remind folks of the schedule and what's next, and then we'll close. So our last question focuses in on zoning. So I'm hoping Paul and Allison will very likely have answers here. Again, from an anonymous attendee. Employment in hospitality and retail collapsed during the recession and the pandemic. Office space is oversupplied. Are you retaining some industrial zone land for long-term businesses producing products in sustainable services?
I can grab this, Liz.
Okay, Allison.
Yeah, so the site itself is the entirety of Palermo Village is identified as a strategic growth area. We're supposed to have higher density and mixed use development. Through the town secondary plan work, they began it before the region kind of underwent their growth management study and prior to the entirety of Palermo, the north half of Palermo Village from Dundas to Highway 407 being identified as a primary regional node. So in the town's secondary plan for this area, which is under appeal, the area north of, I believe it's Glenorchy Road, was identified as business employment with an area for further study overlay. And this was just like, this town had not undergone the study to fully implement the policies for the northern area to reflect its role as a strategic growth area. And per provincial policy, this kind of northern area here, it's within a 400 to 800 meter radius of the planned 407 transitway station, and you need to plan for a mix of uses with higher densities in this area.
Great. Thank you, Allison. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, Allison basically summed it up, but I think if it's the last call, I'll just say if we're looking to build sort of resilient communities that are going to last for the next 100 years, we want to make sure that they have a variety of spaces for the jobs that are here today, but also the jobs that we may anticipate in the future. And those are very hard to predict. You know, the food and beverage, retail, lifestyle stuff that may have died in the downtowns during the pandemic is coming back, but in new ways. But at the same time, we've also seen neighborhoods grow and shift and change as people work from home. And so what we really hope is that we can create that kind of town square, the main street, something that speaks to the sort of character of Oakville, but also creates home for new residents and creates that hub that will become the center of Palermo into the future and create space for not only jobs, but the retail and the life and the vitality that'll come with it. So really thinking that this is an opportunity to deliver on that vision, and look forward to maybe working with everybody to see the next steps as that gets realized.
Awesome. So we could just go to the schedule slide so people can see it. I just want to remind everyone, well, first of all, thank you so much for joining tonight to talk to us about this vision and ask your questions. That's why we're here. Just a reminder, a copy of the presentation will be available on the website after the meeting. A report will be developed, which will summarize community feedback heard and will be shared on the website as well. Questions heard tonight and questions received that we didn't get to will be compiled into key themes and incorporated into the frequently asked questions on the website. So if your question wasn't answered tonight or you have follow-up questions, please send your question or inquiry to info@discoverpalermo.ca. I'll post it in the chat. Paul, if there's anything else on the project timeline to remind people of, otherwise we can close. Okay,
Yep. Thank you,
Great.
everybody.
thank you, everyone. I've just posted
Thank
the
you.
website in the chat, but yeah, that was great. Thanks for spending a July evening with us. Have a safe evening, or enjoy the beautiful weather. Thank you again.
Thank you.